Hello folks, it's Tuesday, it's 3 o'clock, that means it's Tech Tuesday. I'm Rick Usey, I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. I'm Rick Usey with Zecorum, and it's Tech Tuesday. Today I'm going to be talking about just some things that are going on in the broadband industry. I like to cover that every now and then, where we look through some articles and I kind of discuss those, just what I'm thinking about them. A lot of times I try to package those together in a way that's meaningful. So let's talk about that today. Let's see what's happening. So this is something that's coming up here. So this was new today. I saw where the FCC is going to be voting in October to basically to reaffirm their deregulation or taking away the net neutrality rules. And they're going to be at the same time, I think, clarifying some things that the judges that looked at that wanted to clarify. So here, for example, FCC Chairman Pai said Monday, October 5th, that the Commission plans to vote at its October meeting in response to a federal appeals court remand on its Restoring Internet Freedom ISP deregulation order. So the court, for the most part, agreed with them. The Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit upheld the bulk of the agency's decision to reclassify ISP as Title I information service providers as opposed to Title II, which would be a lot of regulations that really are not that meaningful to broadband operators. That's all stuff that came out of the old Telecom regulations, so a lot of it would not be meaningful. To eliminate rules against blocking, throttling, and prioritizing and general conduct rules, so they were okay with that. But it said the FCC had not sufficiently explained the impact of that deregulation. So that's where they need to come back, I guess, and further try to explain the impact of that, which I'm assuming is what they're going to do in October, and then that should take care of everything. Here's a comment from Democratic Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel, who voted against the RIF order and was not pleased. And I think this is a pretty partisan issue going. Republicans are supporting deregulation, which is a very common theme for Republicans, to want the government less involved if it doesn't need to be involved. And then Democrats are usually for more regulation. So we see that here. She says the internet should be open and available for all. That's what net neutrality is about. Now, I've always been kind of against the net neutrality regulations. I'm not against net neutrality, and that's kind of the that's how that's mischaracterized. Is that people that say when you say you're against the net neutrality regulations, people think you're against net neutrality, but that's not the case. You're just against or not in favor of regulations for maintaining net neutrality because they haven't been needed. Prior to any net neutrality regulations, the internet was net neutral. There were no issues. There were one or two little things. Like at one point, I think Comcast might have been blocking BitTorrent traffic, and that's when BitTorrent was a lot of peer-to-peer traffic that was not, it was where customers were sharing maybe software and music and stuff that they shouldn't have been, and they weren't their customers. So, one of their customers might be hosting a BitTorrent server, kind of like a server, and then people from around the world would come and get that stuff, like movies, music, software, those kinds of things. So Comcast was throttling that, and that was an issue, but that was dealt with prior to net neutrality rules being put in place. Today, BitTorrent is used for a lot of very valid reasons, like game updates and those kinds of things. So you couldn't throttle that now. I mean, that's not possible. But again, on the few things that came up, it was always dealt with. There weren't a need for regulations. So in my mind, net neutrality was kind of regulations looking for an issue that wasn't there. So that's the way that Chairman Pai sees it as well. So in October, they're going to go ahead and reaffirm this, and that should take care of the issue, I believe. What else is happening? Cable Labs reaches a key milestone on the path to 10G. 10G is Cable Labs' name for a group of technologies that are supposed to propel HFC networks to speeds up to 10 gigabit per second down. And it's a group of technologies. It's not just one thing, and it's not like 5G. 5G, the G in 5G is not gigabits per second, it's generation. So 5G is the 5th generation of wireless service, but the 10G is supposed to mean 10 gigabits per second. And it says here that they released a new set of specifications giving operators and their suppliers a common framework for disaggregated networks. So basically breaking up the equipment in an HFC network into pieces and parts to make it work better as far as in a distributed access mode, distributed access architecture. The CableLab specifications call the flexible MAC architecture without worrying about getting locked into vendor-specific proprietary technologies. So what's good about this is rather than operators trying to develop this equipment for example, remote PHY, remote MAC PHY, especially remote MAC PHY, on what they think it should be. Now there are standards in place, so you don't need to worry about buying something and then getting locked into that technology that maybe doesn't support a common standard that comes later. So the standards are now out there. And there is this debate that's centered on whether to go with remote PHY, and that's where you've got just the physical layer out at the edge, so to speak, where the PHY of the CCAP is deployed in a fiber node, or remote MAC PHY, where both the PHY and the MAC processing are pushed out toward the edge. So a lot of operators were kind of not sure which way to go. They were kind of waiting to see. It's kind of like, anytime you got a standard, whether it's a video standard, that kind of thing, they're waiting to see which way the industry was going. And now they have some answers there. And really the answer is, what CableLab has come out and said is, it's kind of like they were doing with the 10G specs for full duplex and also extended spectrum DOCSIS. At first there was this question of which way do we go and which one is CableLab going to support. And CableLab said, hey, we're going to support both. So if you want to go, if you're ready to do full duplex, that's fine. We've got a standard for that, and that's in the 10G or the DOCSIS 4.0 standard. And then we've got the extended spectrum DOCSIS. They kind of put those together under DOCSIS 4.0, and it's the same here. So they're basically saying that both of these technologies, remote PHY and remote MAC PHY, can work depending on your situation, and you can deploy one or both in the same particular network. So it says phase 1 of the FMA project, a flexible MAC architecture project, as defined by this initial batch of specs, is focused on remote MAC PHY, where the MAC and the PHY are miniaturized and packed into a fiber node. So basically, that's like what that is like a small CMTS. So basically, you're taking, rather than a big piece of hardware in the head end that's going to serve multiple areas, you can take a smaller CMTS and put it out in the field in a hardened enclosure and do it that way. And there's real advantages to that as well. It's a little bit less complicated than remote PHY, really, because you've got, instead of trying to separate these things and having to worry about timing issues, you've got everything out in the field. And we actually offer, and we're offering a remote MAC PHY. We were calling it that, remote MAC PHY CMTS, because basically it was a hardened CMTS, sitting in an enclosure that you could put on a line or something like that, hanging on a line. But now there's a standard for that. So the people that are making this equipment, if they want to support this, they'll need to make sure that they're applying these standards. Something else that I talked about in a broadcast 3 weeks ago, or I think it was this idea of a standard enclosure. So it's called a gap enclosure, where the makers of these remote MAC PHY devices, this small CMTS, won't have to worry about that enclosure. And I'm assuming that's going to be kind of wrapped up into this, so that you'll have people making these standard enclosures that then you can put in any kind of equipment. You could put in a remote MAC PHY device, this little CMTS, or you could put in a remote PHY device, an RPD, or you could put in a CBRS radio unit for 5G, anything like that. You can put different things in these standard enclosures. So I'm assuming that's going to be part of this as they deploy this. FMA building blocks, FMA phase 1, the MAC manager, the remote MAC PHY device, RMD, and an optional element called the packet cable aggregator. That would be for voice. So there's a diagram here that I don't completely understand. Looks like we've got some RPDs, remote PHY devices here, and then we've got a remote MAC PHY device, an RMD, and it looks like it's got an RPD in it. So maybe those two things do go together. Let's see. So DCA, all these acronyms will drive you crazy. DCA is also a subset of a broader industry program called Distributed Access Architecture, or DAA. That's what I've always called this, was Distributed Access Architecture. So this DCA is a subset of that, which, in addition to DOCSIS, factors in the use of PON and coherent optics in distributed access networks. And those are important, because if DOCSIS 4.0, 10G are going to get to the speeds that they want. They need more fiber in the network, and they need to be doing things like coherent optics to be able to do that. And full duplex, those kinds of things all have to be taking place in order to reach the kind of speeds that they're doing. You need a lot of fiber in the network to do that. So again, ties to 10G. Cable operators aren't going to be able to deliver multi-gigabit services on HFC without some type of disaggregated cable access architecture, whether that involves remote PHY or remote MAC-PHY, or perhaps a mix of both. So again, the idea there is that you're trying to go closer to the customer with fiber, node plus 0, basically out to the fiber, where you've got that RPD or that RMD, that remote MAC-PHY device that's out there delivering the service. And from there, the rest of the way back to the cable plant, it's all fiber. So you don't have all these nodes and amplifiers that you're having to deal with in between. So besides the fact that that's going to provide faster speeds, it's also going to provide better reliability because you're going glass much further out. You don't have all these RF issues that you got to deal with as you go close to the customer. So that's what's happening there. And something that we've all seen as we've been working from home, a lot of people realize when they got home, it's like, wow, I don't have really good internet. So a lot of people have been doing what they could to improve their internet, and we've seen that. Here's an article also from Light Reading, how rising broadband demands might reshape U.S. telecom. Demands for speedy and reliable internet service appears to be an all-time high, which we would expect, again, with lots of people needing access from home. Everybody at home all at once, where a lot of times it was, you did your stuff did a lot of your work at work, a lot of your broadband access at work, and then you came home, and but now it's all day long, multiple people at home using the internet. Customers are flocking to fixed broadband providers like Comcast and Charter in unprecedented numbers, so they've seen great growth. Some investment firms are warning that the value of broadband assets, particularly in rural areas, are going to remain high or sky high for the foreseeable future. I don't know why that's a warning, but I think they're saying that there's a lot of value now. There's a lot of opportunity for rural providers right now to be able to hook up people that have been maybe doing without good broadband internet, but they've realized now that they've got to do school from home, they've got to do work from home, that they really need it. Some big names in the telecom space, including AT&T, Windstream, Verizon, Frontier, and Consolidated Communications, are promising to ramp up their spending on fiber networks. So we're seeing that a lot. And, I was mentioning in the last story, as as these cable operators are deploying fiber further out, then there's more demand for fiber from them. In a lot of cases, they're still going coax to the home, but they're needing more fiber in their network as well. Fixed broadband industry growth accelerated to the highest rate since first quarter 2015. And here's a quote: "We believe the growth came largely from wireless-only households adopting fixed broadband to cope with a higher data consumption during the pandemic." So you had a lot of customers maybe using their phone at home for broadband. It's like, well, I got a good broadband connection at work. I can do some things there. If I get home, I've got my phone. I can use that. But that's not the best thing to be doing if you need a work connection at home, that type of connection, or if your kids are trying to do school. So that's why a lot of people have, in addition to having the phone now, they went out and gotten a fixed broadband product. And then also you have the issue where sometimes these phone plans, not just the speed that you might have an issue with, but they're limited in data usage. So if you've got suddenly everybody in the family on the broadband mobile phone, then you've got some issues with usage where you may be paying extra for that. Penetration of fixed broadband services among consumers will rise to around 86% in 2025, up from the firm's previous expectations of around 84.4%. That doesn't seem like a huge growth, but I guess it does add up. So here you're seeing the original projection and the new projection here. So it's a bump up, and a lot of it's starting earlier on. And we see that specifically here. Is this the article that's got more? No, I thought this was an article that had more graphs. I think that's coming up. But you can see that it ramps up. Again, it doesn't seem that significant, but we have seen, I think it's in one of these other articles, we'll see that there was quite an increase in broadband use. AT&T pulls the plug on new DSL accounts. I think this is all kind of related because, and we'll see that also here in another story about edge outs, but so AT&T has decided that now that they're not going to sell new DSL accounts. So this doesn't mean that anybody with a DSL account now, that they're going to cut them off, but they're not taking new orders for DSL. And that's because, the technology is limited. I mean, there's some things you can do with DSL to bump up the speeds, but I mean, that's major infrastructure upgrades sometimes on the type of equipment that you're using for DSL. So why do that when you can put in fiber? And the cost of fiber and deploying that has come down so much that it wouldn't make any sense to upgrade to a faster kind of DSL technology. With this increased focus on fiber-fed speeds, AT&T is no longer selling DSL to new customers. They notified customers on billing statements in August that effective October 1st, it would no longer accept new orders of its copper-based DSL service. That same day, so again, they're not forcing DSL customers to change, or they're not saying we're not going to have your business anymore. But if they have fiber in the area, they probably want to give an incentive for those people to get off of DSL so they can get out of the DSL business sooner. So that same day, AT&T sunset new subscribers for DSL. It announced that 3 new price points for its AT&T fiber tiers, or announced 3 new price points for its AT&T fiber tiers. They also announced that all new existing AT&T Fiber Internet 100, Internet 300, and Internet 1000 subscribers would enjoy unlimited data without additional charges. So they're taking data caps off of that. It's a standalone product with no annual contracts for new customers that they put together on Sunday. Yeah, on Sunday. So they offered this new product with no annual new contracts. Data caps are still in place for AT&T's fixed wireless internet and DSL customers. So if you're on DSL, you still have to deal with those data caps. So again, if you have fiber in your area, that's another reason to call AT&T and upgrade to fiber. And I think a lot of people will be doing that. And this is just a little capture of that notice that customers saw where they're no longer accepting that new DSL orders right there. So this may be driving AT&T's decision to drop DSL and to try to get people over to their fiber service, and also the fiber expansions that we're talking about as AT&T goes out and they're trying to lay more and more fiber. And that's because cable companies are encroaching in their territory. So it says here, footprint expansions boost cable's broadband growth. U.S. cable operators have seen a massive spike in broadband subscriber growth during the pandemic as consumers clamored for solid internet connectivity. But pure demand is not just one reason for the surge. So part of it is, as I mentioned, people that are at home that say, wow, my internet isn't good enough. But it's not just, it's not just subscribers that would be in a cable operator's footprint that had not, or customers that had not signed up yet. It's not just homes passed that are saying, hey, let's go ahead and call a cable company and get a better connection. This is also cable companies that are expanding their footprint where they were not providing service in that area, and they're edging out, so to speak, their services to other areas. A key one occurring more quietly behind the scenes is that cable operators have accelerated their footprint expansions through edge-outs, expansions of their networks into adjacent rural markets that lack wireline broadband or only have access to relatively slow DSL services. So again, companies like Windstream and AT&T that have got DSL customers have been as quickly as possible trying to get fiber there because they're going to lose these customers to cable, especially as cable operators edge out and maybe overbuild in their existing territory. Cable operators are quietly accelerating homes passed. And you can see here, this shows homes passed growth over time. And this way back here is Q1 2015, and then we've got here Q2 2020. And it's showing Charter, Comcast, Altus USA, and Cable One. And they all seem to be going up with the exception. It mentions Cable One as one that's increased, but I'm not really seeing that. Cable One is this purple line. It seems to me that they've dropped, but you can see the others have ticked up quite a bit. This is Q1 2019, right about the time that everything hit with COVID. And you can see the lines going up here. So they've really been accelerating their homes passed this past year. Last month, WOW reported that its edge-out projects had reached a total of 189,700 homes passed and 45,200 subs out of that since the program's inception. So they've really grown. Charter and Comcast already signaled plans to speed up edge-outs, with Comcast going about it alone and purely organically, while Charter explores it with the aid of government subsidies, including a plan to participate in the multi-billion-dollar RDOF funds. Altus USA is to be a significant player in the upcoming RDOF auction as well, and Comcast has said they might step in for the second round of RDOF. The first round is for areas that are unserved, meaning that there's not a single customer that they can see that has 25 by 3 service. Underserved, that would be unserved. Underserved would be, there might be, what was that, underserved, I think? I can't remember, sorry. But anyway, so the phase 2 will cover people that have got some service, but so Comcast looks to participate in that. And you can see here cable broadband subscriber growth year to year. Again, we're looking here at, this is Q1 2014, and we can see it had gone up, and then we started to see this decline. Then here around 2018, Q1 2018, it kind of went up a little bit and leveled out, and then of course we see what happened in 2019 and 2020. You had this huge uptick. And we're seeing the same thing here with the trend again coming down, leveling out, and then bam, a big increase right there. So that's the impact of COVID. Shentel adds CBR spectrum, launches Beam Internet. So Shentel was a big winner in the CBRS auction that was completed recently. CBRS is mid-band spectrum that's being used for 5G. It's something that was made available recently through the FCC through an auction, and actually earlier than that, unlicensed spectrum was available since I believe it was September of last year. They did a kind of a preliminary rollout, and then in January of 2019 they did a full deployment allowing unlicensed spectrum in this mid-band CBRS spectrum. So that's been available, and then the auction just completed, I think it was not September, I think it was August, the auction completed where you can have these priority access licenses, or these PALs. When you have one of those licenses, you have basically you can't be interfered with by these general access licenses that are unlicensed. So a lot of operators wanted to get those PALs in place so that they knew they had that spectrum. They still need to be careful not to interfere with the incumbents, which would be the Navy that has radar in that spectrum, but there's a spectrum sharing, dynamic spectrum sharing methodology in place that allows them to share that spectrum without really interfering with each other. So it says here that Beam Internet, a new fixed wireless service, is to be offered in parts of Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio. This is all from Shentel. Beam Internet will use both existing 2.5 gigahertz mid-band spectrum and the CBR spectrum that they acquired. They announced that they won a total of 262 PALs in 74 counties at the recent mid-band spectrum auction, CBRS auction. They're offering 3 speed tiers between 25 and 100 megs. So you've got your 25 by 3 tier, that's your minimum FCC standard for RDOF, and that's kind of what the FCC defines as broadband now. And then on the high end, they've got 100 by 10. So this is using wireless CBR spectrum at 100 by 10, and in the middle they got 50. So you got basically 25, 50, and 100. Shentel labels Beam Internet as a 5G-ready fixed wireless service. The company invested $16 million for the CBRS spectrum and won an average of 3.54 out of 7 of the PALs in 74 counties across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. And 3.54 out of 7 is really high because they can only get 4. The way it worked was the FCC was auctioning off 10 megahertz slices of this up to 7, and then one operator could only get up to 4. So if you were bidding, and that's per county, so if you were bidding in a county, you could only get up to 40 megahertz. So basically, they got 3.54 out of 4 that they were allowed, but there were 7 available, so there would have been other operators that could have bid on those other 3 in a lot of these counties. And most of the counties across the United States, most of them all 7 were taken by multiple operators on this auction for CBRS. And then finally, again with 5G, the post offices could be the new edge of 5G networks, this report says. So this is a report by the Inspector General of the Post Office. It concluded that there may be an opportunity to leverage the Postal Service's network of over 31,000 facilities for things like, mentioned right here, putting 5G cell towers on top of post offices nationwide, running fiber backhaul through post offices and into 5G cell towers, offering free public Wi-Fi services in post offices in rural areas. That's a great idea. I know they were doing that in school buses and other places during the pandemic. They were offering free Wi-Fi so students could go somewhere and get internet if they couldn't at their home. Hosting edge computing data centers inside post offices, supporting public safety communications via post offices, having postal workers collect data on broadband availability. So basically what they're saying is we need to be busy doing something, because if you think about it, just over the years, I mean, the post office, the demand for letters has really dropped. First you had faxes, right? Then you had the internet and email and PDFs and those kinds of things. And in line with that, you had FedEx and you got UPS and all these other places that deliver stuff to people, packages and whatnot. So you can see why the post office is hurting. So they're looking to make themselves relevant again, and this is one way they can do it. Now, they can put towers on their property, but for 5G, like small cells, that's not going to work. It's not like you can put small cell on different post offices and that they can see each other, because the small cells don't go that far. I mean, a post office is close enough to be able to do that. But they could put a big tower on their property and do some kind of backhaul with that, maybe a big pole on their building. A lot of these buildings, especially in rural areas, are just one story, so you're not going to be able to just stick an antenna on the top. You're going to have to get pretty high to be able to be doing something, especially in areas where there's trees, those kinds of things. But there's some opportunities there. According to the report, 62 postal facilities lease space to cell tower companies, bringing $1.4 million in annual revenue. So that right there just shows you that this can be a way that the post office can get revenue in so they're not losing money all the time. And this would be, again, where they have property and they've got a big cell tower. It doesn't have to be that big, but they've got a cell tower on their property. Have you seen these cell towers that look like trees? You may not have, because it's hard to see them. They actually fit in pretty well. So when you're driving through some of these areas, you'll pass by and you see this. You don't notice it because it's green like everything else. What you may notice is that it sticks up higher than most of the other trees, but then you look at it and you realize, wow, that's fake. That's not a real tree. It's probably a cell tower. So, OIG analysis found that there are 2,364 USPS facilities located within census blocks that are unserved or underserved in terms of broadband connectivity. Again, that would be 25 by 3. As far as broadband. So there are a lot of these facilities that are in these unserved areas. The question is, how can that help? And it may be just, like I say, through maybe some wireless towers, those kinds of things. Some post offices in the over 280 mail processing facilities may be able to host edge computing also. So you've got, it says here, operators ranging from AT&T to Dish Network have speculated on the possibility of running their software-powered, cloud-based virtualized network functions in public or private edge computing locations around the country. The tens of thousands of offices around the country, including some of the most rural and hard-to-reach locations, that could well provide the kind of security, power, and prices that operators are looking for. So this is another interesting thing they could do, is in these buildings, these facilities that they have, they could create these little mini data centers almost, where they're these connection centers where other operators can connect into. That's one of the things that there are opportunities for cable operators, for example, in 5G. You might think of 5G as a threat to cable, but it really has not shown to be that, and that's because the fastest 5G that we have, which is millimeter wave, doesn't go very far, and you got to have line of sight, which is why, again, you need these antennas to be very close to each other so they can see each other. That's why you can't have a small cell on one post office and a small cell on the other post office and have them communicate. I think they'd be too far apart, especially in rural areas. How many post offices do you have in rural areas? But for a cable operator, they're putting a lot of fiber in the ground in their networks as they go out to the edge. They've got fiber running everywhere. And one opportunity for them is, as they have mobile operators that come in that want to do 5G and they want to do small cell, millimeter wave, then the cable operators can do fiber backhaul or front haul for these folks that want to be connecting up their small cells. So there's an opportunity there. So these people that are going to be operating these mobile networks are going to need facilities like the post office is talking here, and fiber in the ground that they can connect to be able to connect all of these towers together. So there's an opportunity there. All right, that's what's happening today in the broadband world. So if this was helpful, if you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up, and you can always subscribe to us. Just click the little subscribe channel there on YouTube and click the bell, and you'll be notified whenever I am live or post a video, which is about once a week if we're doing Tech Tuesday, and occasionally a recorded video as well. So thanks for joining me. I'll be back next week at 3 o'clock for Tech Tuesday. I will see you then. Bye-bye.